my name's Liam. I'm one of the senior physios here. That goes off okay. My background is in strength and conditioning. Prior to physiotherapist, I did at university and did my thesis and all that sort of stuff. And then when I did physiotherapy over at Bruno Uni, I've been here for a good 4 years. I mean, physio years is quite a long time. It's probably golf carriage clock time, I think. Yeah, so what I wanted to do today is obviously the title sort of speaks for itself, and I think from what Mark's told you, you can all pretty much tell how this talk's going to go. If you do some strength training, it'll be a better outcome for you. And if you don't, it won't. I see a lot of runners at the minute. You can imagine everyone's about mile 19 in their marathon training and the wheels are coming off. And there's reasons why. Strength is usually at the root of it, or lack thereof is usually the root of it. However, there are other things, biomechanics, I'm sure Mark has talked about before, and also stiffness in other joints. What I wanted to do really is, there's a whole gamut of injuries that I treat and that can come through, just even specifically to the lower limb. But I also treat a lot of Ironmen, a lot of triathletes, a lot of pro tennis players, all that sort of stuff, and they all have strength-based injuries of the upper limb, because that's their load-bearing portion if they're swimming, for example. And so I'll talk briefly about that. My specialty is the shoulder. That's what I work with. But as a physio, I have to be able to treat everything. So I see a lot of runners. Typically speaking, and this isn't founded in any literature, although I'm currently trying to get some research ignited in the area in terms of a rehab idea that I've had. What I see in a lot of people, it'll be more specifically mentioned in a moment. Mark probably mentioned pronation, arches of the feet, all that sort of stuff. Rotation is what causes injuries. Rotation is a necessary movement for all your sporting endeavours, running. Martin, say. Yeah, so rotation is needed to even walk forward. To change the channel on when people do low control, your arm goes through rotations as it reaches forward. However, the inability to control that is why I think people get a lot of injuries. So essentially the injury, the pain that people come through, you've all heard of ITB, friction syndrome, runner's knee, we're going to talk about that in a second, plantar fasciitis. There'll be a few things that you may not have heard of. All of these injuries are not necessarily an injury. There's nothing wrong with the body. There's no loss of integrity. Nothing's ripped, nothing's injured, nothing's torn, nothing's snapped. It's irritated. And it's irritated because it can't cope with the forces you're subjecting it to. And usually it's rotation. And rotation occurs because of a lack of strength in other planes of movement. So if we go on, there we go, press down there. Down, there we go. So these are the kind of strength-based, I just sort of went through it in my head, you know, just the top kind of 10-ish of injuries that I see a lot of. Plantar fasciitis is in the sole of your foot. It's where the connective tissue of the sole of your foot goes from your heel to your toes and it pulls on the heel. And the surface of the bone is the only bit of the bone that has any pain receptors. The inside of the bone doesn't have it. So when you break a bone, it's breaking the skin on the outside that gives you the pain. So if you have connective tissue pulling on it, it's the same as scratching your skin for 4 hours. You know, that's not painful, but in 4 hours it might be. Achilles tendinopathy, very common, typically when people are taking a break from training. So when you've done your marathon and you think, oh, I'll have a couple of weeks off, no, I'll go for that run again, oh, my heel's sore. That's why it's usually the rest that people have. So you find now a lot of team-based players, rugby players, football players, they're not allowed to rest even in their off-season in the gym, loading the tendons completely and totally all the time, because those rest periods kill them. Patellofemoral tendinopathy, jumper's knee, that occurs right at the bottom of your kneecap. It's usually a bullet point. Patients come to me and say, my pain is there. I press it, poke it, really scientific, isn't it? Poke it, and it's sore. That's your diagnosis right there. In the absence of other stuff, but that's the same as the word tendinopathy. Obviously, is the same as Achilles. It's a slightly different injury insofar as Achilles tendinopathy in the heel, which is obviously there, is usually born out of weakness, a lack of training. What we tend to find clinically is that the people that come in with patellar tendinopathy are actually really strong. which is a bit of a, kind of throws the theory of weakness out of the water. But essentially, if you think of your leg as a chain, so it's not necessarily your kneecap or the tendon that your kneecap sits in. Hi, you're right.
Hi, sorry.
You're not
you know that it started.
Oh, did it not?
I was kind of sat there like, what else
right.
meant to be
Sorry.
Sorry.
That's alright, you've not missed much. Ramblings of a madman is already yeah, so essentially, with there being an increase in strength, so I get a lot of my tennis players jump his knee, squash players, what else am I true with that? How many runners come in with it? Some do, especially distance runners do, but essentially I find that the knee is a strong part of the chain, as in when the foot plants on the floor, because the foot is connected to the shin bone, to the thigh bone, as that story goes. And there is a weakness in the chain somewhere else. So as a take-home message for the leg, if you remember nothing else apart from this, your hip is a glorious joint. It's really well constructed. It's a working streak basically. It's really, really congruent. It takes loads of pressure, loads of strength, loads of ligament attachment. Your ankle and your feet are not too bad either. Your knee is God's joke. It's the biggest, clumsiest joint you've got, and it basically, stuff happens to it. Very, very rarely, you'll have pain in the knee, it's very rarely guilty, it's usually a victim, because of other weaknesses that are around. Runner's knee is what we're going to talk about in a second, and patellofemoral pain syndrome, which basically is pain at the front of the knee, otherwise known as the black hole of orthopedic medicine. Very misunderstood, very mistreated, very mismanaged by both therapists, doctors and the client, usually. And it's, for that reason, not many people get better straight away. Usually the therapy bores them, I think. They'll have a week where they don't have pain, you think, oh okay, stop going to disappear, and then I'll see them again 6 months later with exactly the same problem, slightly lesser mileage. Meniscal injuries, that's the cartilage in your knee. Your thigh bone, if you imagine Pluto's bone out of Walt Disney characters, the bone with the bally ends, that's your thigh. Your tibia, which it sits on, is kind of shelf-like, it's really flat. And so to house the bally ends, you have a ring of cartilage in your side, and it basically improves the congruence of the joint. You rip that, and you're in a bit of trouble. And I see a lot of those as well. Hip impingement, again, cartilage of the hip, generally speaking. Cartilage of the hip, it can be other things, but you can pinch that. Your hip ball of your thigh bone sits in the socket, like that, and you have a big extensive cartilage that comes out and envelopes it. And what happens is, usually due to muscle weakness and an imbalance, you catch that. And so it becomes inflamed. I'm 33, I'm bang on the right age for that. It's usually my early 30s people who come in and they've got hip problems. Snapping hip, young girls, generally. What happens is the ITB, which we'll talk about at runner's knee, we all heard of in everything you've read and ever heard about, everyone we run to, we're all runners, yeah. We've all got either an ITB problem or know someone who has. The ITB comes out of the glutes basically, and it passes over the hip, top of the hip bone. That movement can sometimes be like that, literally that loud when you're walking, and it's called snapping hip. Not very treatable. If there's no pain, there's no problem with it, really, is what you're told. But restoring muscle imbalance, it usually goes to bed, and it usually happens in young girls because they develop it, and they're not quite finished growing. Glute med tendinopathy, pregnant ladies generally come to me with that, and these are the kind of main ones that I get a lot of because I'm moving the shoulder down to the clinic, so I get a lot of people come and see me. Subacromial impingement, just in the shoulder. Skiing season, I get a lot of people coming in, jam their arm into the floor because they're falling, and basically they cause an impact to the shoulder joint. And it's, I liken it to biting the inside of your mouth. The bit sticks out and you're more likely to bite it again. In the shoulder joint, the bit sticks out, it swells up, and it's really difficult to move your arm, and it has to calm down, and usually requires a bit of rehabilitation. And tennis elbow, who sits at a desk? Yeah, you guys. That's who gets it. Very rarely do I get tennis players from it. It's usually because you're slouch sitting, not a lot of activity going on in your shoulder, and the actual elbow is the strongest joint in the upper limb, so a lot of the force travels there, and the tendon starts to drop down or to pain. Right, that's the major injuries. So if we talk about runner's knee first, so this is the ATB. I'll put that in for just look nice. Essentially, this is the kind of back side angle of the leg. This is your bum muscle, the glorious glute max, biggest muscle you have, and really underworked in most people. And this guy, TFL, which will come up later, is called tensor fasciae lata. There will not be a test on it. Just TFL, okay? So your bum muscle sits at the back, TFL sits kind of in the front of the hip. It's got a lot of controversy about what that muscle actually does. But what we find is it's really hypertonic, or it's got increased tone, really firm and really tight in a lot of people with lower limb injuries. And so usually it's because this guy is not working well. And 9 times out of 10 it's because you can't achieve the position to get that muscle working. It's not because you have a weakness, it's just that the muscle can't fire. The ITB comes down and passes over the knee joint, essentially. Now if you look at the anatomy of it, if you pick up an anatomy or Google ITB, it'll tell you it goes into, this is it, Goode's tubercle. It'll tell you that it inserts into there. Being a sado, and a bit of a geek, in my days at college and university, I spent a lot of time in anatomy labs looking at cadavers and things like that. The ITB does not end there. It's a huge, extensive piece of tissue. It's a load-bearing piece of tissue, just like a bone, and it doesn't really have any control over how tight it is. So when someone says to me, I have a tight ITB, if you don't have a tight ITB, you've got a problem. Really? If it's loose, you're in trouble. The ITB is connective tissue. There's no other way to say it other than this disgusting way. When you buy a steak, it's the bit you can't chew. That's your ITB. Really dense, hard tissue. Has a tensile load of strength, tensile strength of steel. So it's really, 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 really capable bit of tissue. I have a lot of patients, and I hand this out as a treatment. Foam roller, rolling around with it. Who uses that? We'll talk about that in a minute. So foam roller, I tell all my clients to do it because it feels nice. Essentially, it helps you feel like you're doing something, but compression through that is not a good idea for a long length of time, and it's pretty much why people get pain, basically. So, it's, like I said, it's one of compression as opposed to friction. It's usually termed ITB friction syndrome, which gives you the idea something's rubbing. Not the case, really. It's just not that mobile. Your body doesn't have loose bits. It has ligaments and tendons and everything, but everything's housed and really well held together. So the idea that something can do this, you're in all worlds of trouble if that's happening. You've got loss of integrity of your joint, really. So it's usually compression. Now, I should have brought who's been given the physio-y kind of TheraBand? Is there something else back there? Is that that red stuff? Yeah, perfect. And essentially, it's that thick, okay? But if I stretch it, it gets thinner. Yeah? So that, on the inside portion, the bit in the middle, becomes compressed. And that's what I mean by compression injury. It's not that you're pressing on it, it's that it becomes stretched, and the bit in the middle becomes compressed. And that is rife in Achilles tendon problems. So most people come to me with Achilles tendon pain and are told to stretch. That's a great way of making it worse. A really good way of making it worse, especially when it's acute. Stretching has its place, but not generally where runner's knee is concerned and Achilles tendon problems. And that might fly in the face of everything you've heard before, but that's just basically the most common research and what I see clinically as well. I could sit all day and talk all day about what papers I've read, but it's more important to me what I find on my clinic and what I see client-based wise. So these kind of problems, when it becomes compressed and you start getting symptoms, they usually follow what's called an inflammatory pattern. So they'll follow, you'll be worse in the morning, usually the first couple of steps out of bed, or not necessarily then, after a period of rest. So you'll do your run, let's put it in the context of a marathon runner, they'll do the long runner at mile 18, they'll do that on a Sunday, and then on Monday and Tuesday they're in a really bad way. And they'll just get ready for the run on Wednesday, and then they'll be in a bad way again. And what that person is in danger of doing is training themselves out in the event, which is what I see a lot of at the minute. I've got a lot of very desperate people, fix me, that kind of idea, and with these kind of problems, obviously there's a lot of writing here. Sorry. Hi, you're right. With these kind of problems, there's 168 hours in a week. What are you doing for all of them? It's not your running. You're not running for all of those. 9 times out of 10 you're doing this, or you're asleep. So with it being a compression problem, if there's any sort of pressing on it for in one position, sleeping on that bad leg for a while, you're doing that for 8-9 hours, like you should be. Probably aren't, but if you're getting the recommended amount of sleep that you should be having, you're compressing that for 9 hours. That's a long time. If you sit like you are, sir, what's your name? Gordon. If you sit like Gordon is, well, actually, don't move, like so one can see, he's really bent his legs, and he's tucked his legs, his feet right back underneath. So his Achilles tendon is on stretch on your right leg, your left leg not so much, and both knees, the ITB is really on stretch. So the ITB comes from here and attaches to the shin bone, essentially. So there's that bit, it's this portion that we've got to think about. So when I bend my leg, it doesn't suddenly go on a straight line that way, it goes around the corner. And so essentially, it's getting that for how long? You sit at a desk, Gordon?
Yeah, 8 hours I consider this for.
Yeah, most people come to me and decide they're running as the problem. But the running is actually a good thing. So what does all this mean? We're not talking about injuries all the time. So essentially we want to look at why people get it. So the biomechanical influences are usually born out of a lack of strength, usually. So if someone comes to me and they have a lack of movement in their ankle, where post-ankle fracture, they've been in a cast, you'll never see them walking normally. Going downstairs will be difficult. What they tend to do is they turn the foot outwards so they can go like that. They won't do that. That makes sense because they don't have the movement in the ankle. So what I was saying before about rotation, when you've got stiffness in one way, you usually rotate to compensate for it. And it's that control of rotation that will usually, or lack of it, that will usually bring about pain. Or undue stress on the system. So hip flexion balance, you've got a few muscles that do that, basically this movement. So as you're running forward, it's your lead leg. There's a couple of muscles that do it. This guy, iliopsoas, is 2 muscles. There's iliacus and psoas, and they come from your spine and pelvis. They sit really, really deep, and they come down and attach to the hip across here. Very misunderstood muscle complex, as it goes, but essentially can be used very tight in most people when I press on it. That's a good way of getting to jump to the chin. The ITB, which I'm sure, have you all had an ITB massage? Bite on this, I'll get better, kind of thing, yeah? Essentially that's nothing in terms of psoas massage, as opposed to lie one of you down and have a look at it. I wouldn't thank you for it. What tends to happen is they'll use their thigh muscle, their hip flexor and thigh, too much. Now the difficulty with that is that the hip flexor, your psoas, attaches to the actual joint and it's underused. This is it's really well positioned to control your hip. If we look at the door has a hinge, right? So if we pull here, it goes from there, yeah? So your psoas muscle goes from this handle to the hinge. And so when it goes just a little bit past it, so when it contracts, it will open the door. Your hip flexor goes from here, passes right back and goes over there. So when it contracts, it can open the door, but it's got very little control over the hinge. And so I tend to find that when people use that muscle predominantly, they'll overwork or put undue stress on the hip joint. Because we're all flexed at the minute, and we spend most of our time doing that, to get into an extension pattern, standing nice and properly, flexed. When we're in that extension pattern, or trying to get there, most people can't do it. And usually their hips are to blame, or the bum muscles are to blame. So if I'm saying to someone, oh, you don't have enough, your glutes are weak, they can't get to a position where they will contract their glutes properly when they run, or they don't have that in their running style, they're not going to work them. So essentially, you're running this kind of flex position, like that, and that's very much a distance runner that I see. No, never do I see someone like Mo Farah. Arms going back, pulling the elbows back and pushing through the hip. Most people don't have the hip range, so they'll do that at the lower back. So, anybody have lower back pain from running? I bet you're a bloke. No offence, you've got blokitis. You're tight. You're really tight in your hips. You are. Most guys are. I am, usually. So essentially, if I was to treat you and to have a look at your glutes, it's giving you a strengthening exercise is one part of the story. The other part is getting you to be able to actually do it, and that's where the physio's hands-on stuff comes in. But if you're not working your glutes, like I said before, the ITB comes out of the glutes, goes down and joins into the knee. So if these glutes aren't strong enough, they'll tighten up to compensate for that. Does that make sense? So if the muscle can't lift the load, it will tighten and shrink, and it becomes really tensile. So it gives you an extra, another type of strength, which is called inert strength. So your ligaments, your bones, and your connective tissue don't contract. They don't provide any integrity to movement, but they hold you up. Your muscles do the moving, and so they contract, they shrink and lengthen, and they provide glorious control of movement. And if that misfires at all, what happens is you have to get that strength for movement from somewhere, so the muscle becomes like a bone. It becomes more of a structural strut as opposed to a mechanical, mobile bit of tissue. And so I come along with my elbow, press on your glutes, you jump through the ceiling, and essentially, because your glutes give birth to the ITB, they'll go very, very tight, and it pulls on the ITB and causes it to be a little tighter than it was before. That makes sense? But I'm confusing myself. So, what causes it? So essentially, the hip flexion balance, and knee valgus. Usually I take pictures of my clients when I'm testing them. Obviously that's the permission. I had a belter yesterday. I had a young girl come and see me, and she said she had a knee valgus, or an inward bend of her knee when she did a squat. Is the biggest grotesque understatement I've ever made. It was hilarious. She did it on her right side, so I usually get out. Can I borrow you? If you come stand here, now put your hands on your head. It's going straight to YouTube. Just step a bit further forward so we can mind the wall. So hands on your head, stand on your left leg, and do a baby squat for me. Sorry, come back up, stand on your left leg. You're better now, you're a bit shaky. Do a squat for me. See the knee there, as it translated inwards, it almost bends that way. You can imagine the knee's not supposed to do that. Try the other leg. Much more pronounced on this leg. So if I can't guarantee it, but I reckon if I got him to do 10 on each leg, that would become more pronounced as the fatigue sets in the muscles. So what's going on there? His knee's not bending that way. What's happening is rotation. Again, rotation is at the root of everything. So your bum muscles do this. They laterally rotate your hip. Okay. So when he went down and did his squat, you were very, very anteriorly located, so you went forwards. Squat is a backwards movement, so you chose to go forwards. This says a lot about your condition, and well, when I say condition, about how you choose to move, not your condition. Your disposition. So when he did the squat, he went forwards, didn't engage his glutes, and to provide the strength up here, you locked out. You internally rotated, and it gives you the look of doing this. So I get a lot of patients every year coming to me from a consultant, for example, and they say that the kneecap isn't tracking properly. Such rubbish. The kneecap tracks as the kneecap tracks, and it has tracked that way since you were born, since you had one. What happens is the bones underneath it start to move in a different way. So a lot of people say, oh, my kneecap's tracking that way. Well, not really. What's happening is you're going inwards, and so you're exposing that portion of the bone to the movement of the kneecap. Does that make sense? And it can click and do all sorts of stuff because of that. So that's inward knee valgus. So what that does, because you're turning in, you're rotating in, you're taking the end of the ITB away from the other end. So you're causing a length increase, which causes compression. And so do that long enough over a running 5K, 10K, 19 miles on your long Sunday run, and prep for the marathon, that will cause a problem. That will cause a problem. And then back it up, like sitting like Goode for 9 hours a day. And then those 168 hours are starting to add up in the way that you're insulting this area of your body. And yet most of it, the sitting and things, goes completely under the parapet. You don't know you're doing it. You know you're running, so most people come to me and say, oh, I went for a run, it still hurts then. As if, okay, fine. But what they don't tell me, what they don't know, is that they're sitting like this, they're sleeping that way, they're doing all this sort of stuff, and not getting a relevant amount of rest as well. Okay, so that's the valgus. This is a good example of how someone should be. This is an exaggerated, sorry, I don't know your name.
Craig.
Craig. this is an exaggerated form of view, exaggerated, very exaggerated, and this is what I see common. Very narrow running stance and inward rotation of the legs, and it's habitual. So glute weakness. So glutes, 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 glutes for everything for you guys. It's bum muscles, bum muscles, bum muscles, bum muscles. If someone says core stability, walk away. It's not. It's bum muscles. Hip and pelvic drop. And I found a video on YouTube. If you type pelvic drop running, there's a really good video of a woman running. And what I couldn't embed it in the thing. I'm just not gifted enough to do it. I couldn't embed it in the thing, so I couldn't play it for you. Essentially, what she's doing when she's running, she plants her leg, and she gets a drop of this side, like that. And that, again, lengthens the ITP, so it takes this end away from that end. And there's a lack of control, so she locks her joints out, and has that kind of presentation. Whereas she should be steadfast, and so it doesn't do too much of this. So take-home stuff. It's a real challenge for clinicians. I've mentioned a few reasons biomechanically and strength-wise as to why people get these injuries, and the challenge is for a clinician to adequately identify the problem one for you specifically. That is not usually something that's very black and white. The problem with therapy as a whole, in terms of medicine, is medicine, we're all, I get it, we're all kind of usual, we're all beautiful, unique snowflakes, but we're all kind of the same. So on a cellular level, I'm the same as everyone here, and typically an aspirin will affect me in the same way it affects you, and affects yourself, and affects you. But we all move completely differently, as we all have different effects on our body parts. So yes, I know my anatomy, and I've studied physiology, and it all counts. But what do you mean? I've treated you before, haven't I? Yes. Your right hip is probably anatomically different to your left. That's very common. And so to say, oh, you have a hip problem, how? Why, what, where, when, all these specifics will dictate how you treat, how you are, and how we progress your strength. So patellofemoral pain, usually there's two major ones. Fat pad is the one I see a lot of. Fat pad impingement. It's horrible. It's not a nice thing to have, and you can nurse it for quite a while, and then it explodes all over you. It's a bad thing to get. Lateral pressure syndrome, again. If we rotate our leg in and the kneecap starts to basically rub on the outside portion, the cartilage underneath the kneecap has very little nerves, blood supply, which makes it bad for healing. It doesn't heal very well, but you also can't feel a problem really in that area. So most people come to me with anterior knee pain and say, oh, the x-ray says my cartilage is wearing away. That's not the reason why you're in pain. You're in pain for another reason. Because I know there's no nerve endings in there to give you that kind of pain. So what's happening? What else is going on? Usually this guy's involved, and usually it's a bursa, which is confusion again. It's a fluid sac that's supposed to aid or remove friction. So when they become, the irony of a bursa is it's there to help you. When it becomes slightly insulted, it does quite the opposite. It's really, really vicious with its pain. And so I have a lady who I'm treating at the minute who sadly she fell off a bike when she was 17. She's mid-40s now, and the crossbar snapped and went straight into her knee. Yeah. So you can imagine what mess her knee's in. She's also a little bit overweight. She's really vigilant with her exercises though. She's amazing. She's a great lady. But the problem is, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. She's got such lateral excessive pressure that this guy, as she's had to have surgery on it, had it all resected and chopped back. This is really innovative, has a massive blood supply, so she's in a lot of pain, but she still goes to boot camp, she still does her strengthening, she does everything, but by virtue of bending and straightening the knee, she's aggravating the problem. That's a slightly different case. More often than not, it's a mild case brought on because the bum muscles aren't firing properly, and when you're landing, all of that stress is basically taking its toll on God's job that is your knee. I'm 96 kg. It should be a little less than that. How much of that do you think goes through my knee when I'm walking? 4 times it. So 400 kg, 400 kg, 400 kg is going up the ground through me every time. It seems a bit unbelievable and a bit astronomical, but it's also irrelevant because I'm built to cope with it. When I have an injury, that amount of force will find the injury. So if I don't have the muscular strength to deal with the forces that I'm subjecting on myself, the force doesn't disappear, doesn't go away. I still weigh what I weigh. I can replace some of the, let's say, the tissue that's not paying rent. I could replace some of that for muscle, and I'll still weigh the same, but I'll be better at coping with things than if I'm weaker. So the forces go up the floor, through the leg, and they'll either find my kneecap and meniscus and fat pad, or they'll find my quad muscles and my glutes. And so if I don't have the right amount of muscles, I'm going to have problems. So in terms of your running, so the fat padding injury we just spoke about, increased lateral pressure, again, this is the biggest thing I would say. You can often be really damaged before you come and present. So you'll run and run and run, I'll run through it, that's what I hear a lot of. I try to run through it. Doesn't work. But having said that, you don't know what you've got, and you've just got a niggle and you want to be out on the road, and I completely respect that, that's fine. But essentially, I see a subgroup, don't I, of people. I don't see healthy runners, do I? I see people who've got injuries. So to me, everyone's injured who runs, in my mind. But that's not the case. Overstride. This is a big problem, and this is usually what I see a lot of, and I think Mark would have gone on about it a little bit. I saw him dare to talk about midfoot running earlier. Yeah, that's why I came in, because he would have had you for another 3 hours. Yeah, great. So essentially, excessive overstride increases the likelihood that you're going to land heavy and rigid, and that's not good. So my first thing that I get my clients to do is once the physio, you usually say, stop running, and then you go, I don't want to stop running, I'm going to train for this, I want to train to continue. That's fine. So I look at how you're running. Usually, shrink your stride length and increase the cadence. So try that with any injury. You're biomechanically more efficient, you'll be twice as knackered, and you'll feel that you'll think people are looking at you because you'll feel funny, but you don't look funny, you just feel it. You're generally landing with your centre of mass over the base of support, which is a really good place to be. So if I try to do standing on one leg with my foot out there and my bum back here, I'll topple backwards. So when Mark was talking about midfoot running and he showed you the Tamsin Lewis, where she lands there, does that, and goes off again, that's because she is a big strider. Now, if you've got the adequate strength, if you're strong enough, you can cope with it. That's absolutely fine, but most people can't, and that's why I see them. So they'll be running, they'll stride out like that, usually heel strike, and then what happens is the knee doesn't have, it's not optimal in its biomechanical position, if I want to start going on about it, to load itself. So what happens is it snaps back. And that looks disgusting when I do it, but it's not that pronounced on everyone. Essentially, that will trap fat pad from the joint and leave you susceptible to problems. There you go. This is typical. So that looks pretty good, doesn't it? It doesn't look like a bad runner at all. If you saw him running, you wouldn't think. But for me, that's a nightmare. That's the guy who comes to me and he's a very keen runner and he will not stop, and I can't get his pain right because he won't stop loading it in a way. If we think about training progressions, and what I know that it's easy for physio to come in and talk physiology and anatomy at you, but I know that you guys want something, how can it help you? Actually, is what we're going to think about. My previous degree was all based around training progressions, and this idea, flexibility into rotation. You'll get a lot of physio exercises that I see where people consider clinicians, like chiropractors, osteopaths, physios as well. They seem to want to make people very flexible into rotation, and I don't really subscribe to that. I think that invites injuries. So when I try and give exercises for this guy, let's say this strider guy there, let's say he's got a knee problem, he's got weak glutes, which is a typical presentation. If I give him exercise, I'm less likely to give him functional-based exercises. In the mid-90s, physiotherapy basically went through a massive overhaul when everyone got Pilates crazy and went towards function, so giving people exercises in their running stride, for example. The problem is, if you're having trouble with that and you have pain, me giving you exercises in that activity is just going to invite more pain. So what I usually do is I'll give people exercises laid down on the floor and increase the brain's link to the muscle group that I want to work. So if someone, I think, is typical, my noting, if you were to read my notes, please don't, if you were to read my notes, it would say glute weakness. Now I know what that means to me, but if someone read it, it would mean that their glutes are weak, but like I said before, it's more often than not, they're just not getting to that position where they're using it. So what I'll try and do is link the brain more to the glute muscles. So one exercise I want to go through well. Jane Fonda exercise. That, if you just have a whiz through it with your head, just read it. That takes 4 minutes per leg. So it's 30 seconds for each bit. It's a killer. It's an absolute killer. And it really separates the men from the boys. I'm always impressed if someone can get through it and not want to cry. So what I want, if can I borrow your son? You're not going to do that. Don't worry. You're not going to do that. Sorry. I'm not selling it very well, am I? No. Right. You are going to do a bum-based exercise. Is that in your eyes? Do you want to maybe set this idea? So your pelvis is stabilised by your bum muscles. Essentially, think of it globally like that. The anatomy of it all is much more complicated, but essentially when I'm walking, these bum muscles are now working, and these ones as I'm going along, and it's the same when you're running. So when my foot's not on the floor, it's in the air, the bum muscles also move the leg around. So that's why you'll see people in the gym lifting the leg up to the side, trying to exercise their glute muscles and target them. So this exercise is going to target you both sides, one in stance phase, and one with the leg in the air. So what I want you to do is, if you actually use the mirror, so draw a dotted line down from your nose, all the way down to the floor. Okay, straight line. That's not allowed to break, but it will bend, it will lean. So can I get you to stand on your left leg, but don't break that line. Just tighten your core, take your shoulders over as well. The wall's there if you need it. Now hold yourself there, okay? Put your hand on your hip. Where's your hip? There's your pelvis. Your hands on your hip. There, exactly. Most people don't know where their hips are. Another little theory of mine, why people have back pain. So if you put your hand on the hip, and I want you to, when you're doing this, just feel the hip. I can't say it, make it any clearer than that. I want you to take your leg, without breaking that line, don't move your upper body at all, take your leg out to the side. As far as your hip wants to go, you'll feel the hip get tight, is that okay? Any more than that, you're going to start using your back to lift it, and that's what most people do in the gym. Amazing ranges, they think they're doing great stuff, and actually giving themselves a disc herniation in the back. I should have a car, just don't hand it out to them. So stand on your leg again, on your left leg, take the leg out to the side, hold it there. Keeping the leg out that far, gently take the leg backwards, and you'll feel it tighten up again, but don't lean forwards. Feel your bum working now? Yeah. Should we all go get a cup of tea? If you go back into that position. Okay, now, without moving your pelvis, I want you to twist your legs so your toes face the crowd. There. Now your pelvis won't move. Do you see that? So if you just try and do it without your pelvis going, without your pelvis moving, the range will be tiny. Don't try and achieve a big movement. There. I'll let you wear that, but you're kind of in a position. Can you feel your bum working? Can you feel your bum working on the other side? Your legs. Yeah. Oh right. Okay. So you're probably loading it. I normally get people to do that, so it's that. And I can really feel my foot tightening in this leg, and then I get to do this, and you're there for a minute, and then I get to do this. That kind of stuff.
So is that the Jane Fonda exercise?
No, the Jane Fonda is level 4. Right. This is my stud version of it. If you want, if you ask at the desk, I'll email this to you if you want it. Just, can you get them, Liam said, can you take all the names down on a piece of paper, and what I'll do is at the end of the day I'll just send you all an email just with this slide, or these words. Yeah. And I dare you to try it. I want to hear from all of you. But that is my version of that. That's what I do in standing, and I generally try and improve people's glutes. That's obviously an exercise where I'll build you towards running. Hello?
Can you do that one too?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's kind of it, really. Have you got any questions? You've probably got loads of them that you'll probably think of when you leave.
Can I just ask, so last year I had really bad runners knee, and actually it was a run up to marathon, and so the solution was actually following
I do hand it out. I hand it out all the time because it's self-massage. It's like a replicable thing that you can manage yourself and take away and do it. But doing it for, most people come for a massage for like an hour, half an hour. That's what usually people come for. If you're foam rolling around that area for that length of time, Up and down, you've got loads of muscles underneath, you've got also all the other things going on. So I usually say foam roll for about 5, maybe 6 minutes. Leave it. Exactly. And also, people roll on a foam roller. It's the worst name for a piece of kit I've ever heard. It should be called a cylindrical self-massage device. If you roll up and down on it, you give yourself a surface bruise. That's all you do. If you all just feel your righty bit side now, dig your fingers in, find a sore spot. There's one for me. Yeah, find a sore spot, press it. If you keep the pressure on, that will start to ease up. You will neurally get used to it. The tissue, yeah, there you go. Foam foam level. So if you were to foam roller that, I would have you travel on the foam roller to that point, wait until it gets better, then travel to the next point. At no point, at no time are you rolling up and down. It's a misnomer. I also use a lot of spiky balls. So I get people to usually buy one from here or through Amazon or whatever, and they're quite good because you can carry them around in your bag, and they're good for upper limb as well. But yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a. I get a lot of people coming in now who've been and seen maybe 1, maybe 2 physios and they know better, and so they come to me for either another opinion or to check that their physio's doing the right stuff, or whatever reason people come to us for the treatment. But essentially, they've been over foam roll. I'll cease it. So if someone comes to me with an injury, like a muscle tear, and they can't understand when they're getting better because they're stretching all the time, immediately I'll stop them to stretch. Immediately. Because it's the thing that you kind of, it's programmed into you to sort of do it. I think it's almost like 70s Romanian football warm-up, that kind of stuff. But essentially, you've got to think about what you're doing with your strength training, with these kind of injuries. Target your treatments, target your self-medication, which is stretching, heat, rubbing it, going for a massage, seeking advice, all of that sort of stuff you do instinctively. But if you target it a bit more and think about what you're actually trying to achieve, you'll be more successful. Any more questions?
Just one more. If you've got Goode weakness and issues with the ITB, would you recommend stopping running completely and just focus on?
It depends on the progression of your problem. If you're really hyperinflamed and you're getting pain while you're running, yeah, absolutely, I'd cease running altogether just for the time being while that settles down. It's just the same as trapping your finger in the door on the way out or banging your elbow. You will get a bruise, you'll get irritated, you'll get better. If you offload it, it gets better quicker. So what I normally say to people is they don't want to stop running, they don't want to stop training. So you can replace running really, really well. You can do spinning, you can do swimming, you can do all that. You will never get the heart rate replication that you try and get. Most people, that bothers them, that they don't feel as exercised. But you can't be as exercised, you're injured. And you've given yourself that injury. So you've got to program yourself out of it. So modifying what you're doing is the best way. So if someone's really minor, I'll get them to change how they're running. I'll get them to change have a look at their training volume. That's usually guilty, the training volume. Who subscribes to Runner's World or follows a training plan? Yeah, it's a great way to get injured. Great way, brilliant way. Follow that, stick it on your fridge and follow it to the left. You won't break, you will. Because at no point is there any strength training, ever. And so running. I've never thrown a rugby ball in my life. Okay, if I want to go and play with balls, I'm not going to just play rugby, am I? I'm going to learn how to throw the ball, I'm going to be in the gym doing strength training, and I'm going to learn about the rules and do all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to learn rugby by just playing. I have to condition myself for it, otherwise I'll get munched by some big forward prop guy. But when you're running, it's the same thing. Yeah, everyone can strap trainers on and just go. And it's a great thing about running, but it's also its biggest sin. Not everyone's built. What's it, the old book, isn't it? Some are more equal than others. They are. We have a bell-shaped curve. Most people are in the middle and are really capable, but then I usually see the polar ends of that curve where people aren't. Either they're really, really strong and they're the elite athletes that come in, or they're really weak and in pain. Yeah. So if your injury is really far down the line, you're really inflamed, of course you offload it, you do, but for a limited amount of time. You shouldn't really interrupt your training. What I'm trying to say, I suppose, in this is better put by other runners. Don't take my word for it. I can barely run to the fridge. I hate running. It's my nightmare exercise. I can't do it. It doesn't like me. But I rehab lots of people, and I feel like I've run about 50 marathons. I'm saying skiing. I feel like I should be awesome at skiing, but I'm terrible. There's a really good book called Run Less, Run Faster. It's about £3 or £4 on Amazon. And these guys are all like real proper seasoned ultramarathoners, Ironmen, all that sort of stuff, who went and got nasty, horrible injuries, tried running through it, got really, really down, and then just had to rebuild from the ground up. And it basically, take their word for it, it's a great book, and it just basically says what I've been trying to beat into my clients for a decade. So I hope it helped you in some way. If you need anything, if you want to liaise with me about a problem, you don't have to come and spend loads of money in the clinic. Just drop me an email. We can chat about it that way. And if I can't get back to you straight away because I'm busy, and I am busy, but I'll always try and help people. Absolutely, that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm doing today. So hopefully it's all right. And all in, got something from it. Thanks for coming and for listening to me ramble on and on and on. Have a great day. Are you going out to enjoy the sunshine at all?